People who didn't forever hold their peace in a wedding. Why? At my uncle's wedding the priest asked the question and there was a massive crack of thunder. I conducted my friend's wedding. We wrote in the line, if there is any person here present who knows of any legal impediment to these two people being joined in matrimony, then frankly you should have said something before now. You've had the invitation for months. My wedding. Got married in a 200 years old chapel. It had these tremendously heavy doors behind the altar that in my lifetime of going to mass there, I'd never seen opened. Just when the priest asked for objections, a gust of wind blew both sets of doors wide open. It took about 6 men to force them closed again. The priest just calmly looked up and said, okay, we hear you. Then he raised one eyebrow at the two of us. Wedding went on as planned. Marriage didn't. My favorite was a wedding I went to for a friend where, when they asked this question, the father of the bride unloaded a fart that echoed off the church bench, so loud that everyone stopped and just looked at him. The bride started laughing so hard that her face turned bright red and she had to sit down. 10 minutes of her laughing so hard she didn't make a sound, while the rest of the church laughed. Finally the dad stands up and says, look, I had a bajol this morning. It didn't sit well. The mother of the bride hit him, but laughed and everyone laughed again. Was probably the best wedding I have ever seen. My godson objected at my wedding. He screamed no at the top of his voice once the registrar asked the question. Luckily he was only one at the time, so we all had a good laugh and carried on. The photographer managed to get a great picture of the exact moment everyone started laughing. Poor little bugger. At my cousin's wedding, it was a full-on 2-hour-long Catholic affair with hymns, blessings, verse readings etc. Anyway, the priest asks the question and my cousin's brother stood up, adjusted his shirt, stared at my cousin getting married for what felt like forever, grinned, then slowly sat down. My cousin getting married went completely insane, ran down from the altar and socked him right in the nose, screaming, why do you have to ruin everything? And that's how I was a part of a mass brawl, lol. My aunt had her wedding at my grandmother's house. It was a nice Saturday afternoon, 1 PM wedding. If anyone has reason. A very loud car in the distance does a short burnout. After a pause, the pastor continues, if anyone has reason that these two shouldn't be. Same car in the distance loudly pulls a full quarter-mile run. 10 seconds or less pass before it is quiet again. There was a nearby drag strip and they were not supposed to start until 2 PM. Both the 1 PM wedding started late and the 2 PM drag racing started early. The entire ceremony had 10-second or less interruptions. A few years after I graduated from college, a distant friend from high school asked if I would stand up in her wedding because one of members of the wedding party had backed out. I said sure, happy to do so, because I would be at the wedding anyway. I show up at the wedding as the replacement member of the wedding party and assume my place at the front of the church during the ceremony. At the point in the ceremony where the minister asks people speak now or forever hold your peace, this person who I replaced in the wedding party shows up at the chapel, points to the happy couple and says I got crabs from them. Seems the happy couple had a three-way with this person sometime before the wedding, which is why I had to replace that person in the wedding party. Further seems that the reason that this person got crabs is that this couple had lots of three-ways and extra relationship sex before getting married. This was later confirmed by other members of the wedding party. No joke, the appetizer at the wedding reception was crab cakes. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Not my wedding, nor my peace, that didn't get held. My best friend, the morning before his wedding, his crazy uncle, you know, that one black sheep uncle that everybody seems to have, shows up at his door. You don't have to do this. We are 2 hours drive from Mexico. Here's the keys to my car. The tank is full. And here's 10 grand in cash. My buddy laughs and closes the door on him. Later, during this very fancy, very prim and proper Catholic wedding, it comes to the anybody here part. Immediately that uncle stands up in the pew, in the back, starts rattling his car keys as loud as he can, and yells, take the money and run, boy. My family works with college students, so they're always getting invited to weddings. I've probably been to around 50, 60. I have never a single time heard the pastor slash officiant slash Elvis impersonator say the forever hold your peace line. Like even if someone did have a reason for them not to get married, I don't think they would have been invited. My dad. I didn't say anything during the ceremony, but I was definitely telling my sister we could still leave right now and cancel the whole thing right before it. She was only marrying him because he got her knocked up. They were both 19, and I was pretty sure he was already an alcoholic. Their marriage lasted only 2 years. I was right about his drinking. A handle of Jack every day. However, my sister didn't let it tear her down. During her marriage she enrolled in college, eventually getting 2 degrees and lifting her son and herself out of what was going to be a terrible path. I feel her life would have been easier if she had listened, but she still succeeded the hard way. My mom wanted to stop the marriage of her half-brother and her stepsister, but the wedding was in prison, so she wasn't able to attend. My husband and I had a justice of the peace wedding, then did the actual ceremony with a priest later. The priest was super cool and had come through at the last second when our original officiant backed out. When he got to the part about objecting, he said, "And if anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, you're too late." You know, the point isn't for someone to morally object to the wedding or an ex to profess their love. They traditionally asked this so, if anyone had any proof that the marriage would be incestuous, they could prevent them marrying. I got married in March. We had a Wild West wedding complete with antique pistols and a saloon reception. When that line was said, as was the plan, my man of honor stepped out of the wedding party line and objected. He was then shot on the spot by my husband and loaded antique pistol, so it just made a loud noise. My new brother-in-law then dragged him off to the side where he remained for the rest of the ceremony. There is a great photo of us at the front with me clutching my pearls, while my husband stands with 6 shooters in each hand asking anybody else. The bride and I had been friends for a long time, so I knew I had to say something. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, I took a deep breath, stepped forward and said as firmly as I could, "I object." The bride turned towards me. We locked eyes. No one said a word. The bride reached down, pulled a Nerf gun from her garter, and shot me square in the chest. I fell to the floor. The ceremony continued, with one attendee dead on the floor and all objections properly addressed. I saw someone object once. It was an outdoor wedding, and the guy performing the ceremony asked if anyone objects, and someone stands up and say, "I do. I object." He was promptly grabbed by a couple of guys and thrown in a trunk. That was a fun wedding. That is there for when someone has information that would annul the marriage. Say for example that one of them is married, or they are unknowingly siblings. If someone uses it unironically to be a super romantic movie protagonist, he's gonna be laughed out and very likely never spoken to again. Pretty sure I'm going to do this at my sister's next wedding. She's engaged to husband number 5 who just happens to be a drug addict. There are children involved, hers not his, and I just generally can't stand the guy. She might hate me for it, but at least I can say I tried. Or maybe I'm being selfish. My husband and I got married in a public park near a bay that we grew up fishing in. Mid-ceremony, a little fishing boat motors on by, with 2 guys in it. They are probably about 80 yards away, holding drinks. One says, "Look, it's a wedding." About a minute later, the other yells, "She don't even like you." My mother-in-law yelled back, "Don't make me cut you at my son's wedding." Forever immortalized in my wedding video. That's what I get for having a wedding in a public area. We had this line taken out of our wedding because we knew my mother would object if given the opportunity. She showed up with a friend we had not invited, who wore all black and sat in the front row bawling the whole time. She had written me a 6 PG letter the week before the wedding, literally calling me the Antichrist, and with slashes convinced she's a prophetess of God, and that my husband and I were not supposed to get married because she had prophesied he was supposed to marry someone else so he could become the next Billy Graham. 12 years later, marriage is still going strong, but we don't have contact W/Mill. Big surprise. It was actually my wedding. My son and I were in Paris of all places at this high-profile amusement park. Well, I coincidentally met the manager of the park. She wasn't the best looking or the nicest, but hey, I was lonely. To make a long story short, she actually hated kids, which is obviously a deal breaker for me because of my son. But she was using me and my son to prove to her boss that she liked kids. Why would she do this? Because if she showed him she liked kids, she would be his successor and be the CEO of the whole amusement park franchise. Unfortunately, I fell for her and was blind to the fact that her Japanese assistant was the one who was nice to my son, where my then girlfriend was terrible to him behind my back. She coaxed me into the wedding, and I fell for it. Again, I was lonely. Well, fast forward to the wedding. The person that objected was actually my son. He ran down the aisle screaming "No!" It was his first word. I knew if he didn't approve, I couldn't be with her, and her whole plot was uncovered. And I found out that it was actually her Japanese assistant that I was supposed to be with the whole time. We've been married for 18 years. I've never heard about this in Slovenia, only movies, and the crappy ones, not the cool ones like Terminator or Rambo. My wife's grandmother was a sweet woman who was battling dementia and Alzheimer's. When it came to that part of the ceremony, she blurted out, "Women aren't allowed to marry people." Our officiant was a female minister. After a short pause and some shushing from the family, she then exclaimed, "But he looks like A.L. Roker. I'm a pasty Irish boy, for what it's worth." The bride cheated with me a week before, and the day before, and thought the man should know. At my wedding, someone told other guests, who she had never met, that we were a bad match, and it wouldn't last. Didn't have the minerals to speak up during the ceremony, but slagged us off to other guests at the dinner. She could have talked to us beforehand, or talked her out of it, or just not come. But ruining the party for other guests is despicable. Frickin' slag. My cousin was married outdoors at a golf course. When the officiant said this, a bunch of ducks on the lake right by us took off in flight and started quacking. That sounded like mocking laughs. I raised my concerns to the bride about 2 months prior to the wedding, since some things she said set off some major red flags. Still not over her ex. Feelings for another guy. Future mill. Didn't agree on having kids. I was told, in no uncertain terms, that she was ready to get married. This was the right decision, and he was the right guy. I kept my mouth shut at the actual wedding. One of my best friends asked me to be his best man. I had to decline, because he already separated from his bride to be years earlier. She got kicked out of her parent house when we were in high school, so he dropped out of school and got a job and apartment for both of them. He maximumed out his credit card to furnish their apartment with everything she wanted. After about a year of her ruining almost all of his relationships with family and friends, and racking up bills and debt, she moved out while he was at work. All she left him with were some collectibles that he had from his late father, his TV, PS2 and bed. He was distraught for a long time after that, and took a long time to stop being depressed all the time. She treated him like dog crap the entire time they were together, and she was fat and ugly. So I never knew why he was so upset or what he actually saw in her. He told me several times to remind him to never talk to her again. Like seriously begged me to stop him if he ever tried to contact her. About 5 years later I had a job opportunity and moved across the country. We kept in touch and talked to each other a couple times a week. I was trying to get him to move out cause there was lots of work. Then one day he says he getting married and wants me to be his best man. That's when I find out. As soon as I left town he started dating the same chick again, and I do what he told me to do. I say no, because he made me promise, so I'm not going to stand there and play nice. I tell him Shibishan this will end the same way, except it will be divorce, so she'll legally be able to take all your crap. Huge fight and a 16-year friendship is over. I feel bad but also betrayed. 2 years go by, and I get a phone call from my buddy. She's left him and their daughter high and dry divorce. She takes everything and leaves him with a toddler. Sorry dude, tried to warn you. Haven't at his wedding, since it's yet to happen, but my entire family and I have voiced our opinions on the matter since they got engaged to both of them. They constantly fight to the point that one or the other punches a door/wall or breaks things. They scream at each other or belittle one another in front of the family at holiday events. She claims he sexually assaulted her. At this point my brother pulls just under a 6-figure income. She refuses to get a job, even though he can't afford his bills and hers. They claim they only fight because of her 9-year-old who now she has sole custody over since baby daddy is in jail. The kid's taken up peeing on the floor in her bedroom when she's grounded and then blaming it on the dogs and destroying his new house while mom sits at home wasted. She likes to pretend that everything is kosher. Last time I saw her I had told her my so at the time treated me like crap and I was breaking up with him. She went after me for allowing him to treat me like such and was working herself up over it. I asked her why she lets my brother do it to her then. Because I love him. LPT, if you're going to object to a wedding, be kind and break up the marriage before the ceremony to avoid the public humiliation for all involved. Also, this question rarely gets asked anymore, especially at weddings not held in a religious location. I was wasted and I hated the bride. My family was horrified, but turns out she was skimming my cousin's bank account and really was sleeping around. Marriage lasted 3 months. Not really an answer to your question, but my sister-in-law's sister was getting married outside. There was a soccer field across the road with a game going on. When the preacher asked if there was anyone who objects to the marriage, there must have been a goal, because there was a huge cheer from the soccer field. Wasn't at the wedding, but a few months prior, I had introduced 2 of my friends, who lived in separate towns. They hit it off immediately and soon got engaged. I was enthralled. After the proposal I was asked by my male friend to be the best man, which I happily accepted. I took my duties very seriously because I don't take the sanctity of marriage lightly. A few months into the engagement I would go to parties where my male friend would take ladies into his room that were not his fiancée, not ladies our age either. Very young ladies his roommate and him would bring from out of town to have sex with. I talked to him and told him if he didn't cut it out his fiancée would find out. He thought she wouldn't. How could she? She lived over 100 miles away after all. Well, after about a month of this, I call up his fiancée and tell her everything. Apologize for not telling her sooner, and apologize for introducing her to an obvious scumbag. I tell her she should immediately call off the wedding and tell him to hit the bricks. She follows my advice, and not long after I'm receiving death threats. I tell him if he wanted me to keep quiet he shouldn't have done it, or at the very least done it in front of his best man. Definitely have no regrets. I did the right thing. A friend of mine from university, married couple years ago. The bride says yes. Everyone claps. Then official asked to my friend, do you accept blah blah as your wife? Suddenly power went out. Pitch black. All our friend group whispers each other this is a sign. We should save him. Half hour later power came back and the wedding completed. They are still together. Our friend group is not. Attended my cousin's wedding. He was getting married to a woman who was all about the money and glamour and preferred going out and drinking to taking care of the daughter they already had. But they tied the knot anyways. Soon as the speak now line was spoken, my grandma made the loudest ha and mumbled something. It was well known that grandma didn't like the bride one bit. The acoustics of the church didn't help at all either. It was so loud. The bride and her mother both stared daggers, while the rest of us tried to contain our laughter, because it was grandma and that's what she does. The next day both the bride and her mother went to my grandma's house uninvited, and they had a verbal brawl. Someone got shoved out the door and a pot was broken. Silly woman left my cousin 2 years later. Good riddance. Really? Really I'm going to be the one to say it. Alright. Genital warts. When my parents got married I was about a year old. They had a courthouse wedding. I was on my mum's hip. When the judge asked if anyone objected, I started crying. They have been divorced for 20 years now. At cousin's wedding, turns out bride cheated on him. The other guy thought he was the only one. He spoke up and well it just spiraled from there. He's with a better wife now, she is out of state. Not me, but when my friend got married his family didn't show up because he was going to marry a woman that just wanted a citizenship and money. Sure enough after she got it they divorced. I'm sure if the family showed up there would have been some verbal and physical examples on how they can't hold their peace. My husband and I met online. We talked for years before he finally moved in with me. We lived together for a year before getting married. On my wedding day, my two uncles and my dad pulled my husband to be aside and told him they would give him a check for a plane ticket home if he left right then. They said my mom's side of the family was totally crazy and they wanted to spare him. Hubs laughed and then my huge 6 feet 8 inches massive uncle grabbed his shoulders and said, "No, really, they scare me. I would leave if I could. Get out now." And he was dead serious. So Hub shrugs and says, "I'll be okay," and he walked away. We are still married 10 years later, but have cut off ties with my mom's whole side of the family. They really are crazy. At my friend's wedding they used their chihuahua as the ring bearer. They got him a cute little tuxedo and everything. He walked the pillow down the aisle perfectly and was the goodest of boys that day, until the priest asked the room. Fricker barked for the first time that day and wouldn't stop. Well, I was in a mid-budget romantic comedy filmed in the 90s. My generic girlfriend had left me, and even though she felt like she'd found the love of her life, I knew that what she really needed was to be with me. Naturally, I followed her limo to the wedding in a dramatic, not at all restraining order inducing motorcycle chase, and I completely ruined her wedding, saved her from having to spend her life with generic not me dude. After an inconvenient traffic incident, I lost sight of her limo, and it became a race against time just to get there before the marriage was finalized. Just as my girl was pausing dramatically before saying "I do," I burst into the vaguely non-denominational, but definitely Christian chapel she was getting married in and yelled, "Stop this wedding." After an impassioned speech about second chances and those things in life that really matter, the whole audience of underpaid extras applauded, and Mr. Not Me looked vaguely disappointed. Cut to me and Hot Babe driving home in my convertible black car. Wait, didn't I have a motorcycle earlier? As the credits roll up the screen. What a day. I'm so irritated that almost all of the commentary is from people explaining or just joking. Ugh, I wanted top read some good quality stuff here. People. Not my story, but told by the priest who officiated at my sister's wedding. A military chap was getting married and all his colleagues came in dress uniform which included swords. When the question was asked you could apparently very clearly hear them all pull the swords out by an inch or so and then put them back when the priest carried on. Obviously no one objected. Nice touch. Does this question get asked in real life? I've been to several weddings and have never heard this question asked. I only see it in the movies. I'm getting married this weekend. I feel like I shouldn't read this thread. Maybe I should have objected when the priest called me by the wrong name 3 times during the ceremony. Divorced after 3.5 years. My friend Dan, at his mother's wedding to stepdad number 1 when that question came up, he cleared his throat twice as loud as you could possibly imagine. His mother's head span round like the girl from The Exorcist. The death state she gave him was intense. He said nothing more, and the wedding went ahead. His point was made. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.